welcome to My Divorced Real Estate. I'm Amber Gifford, and this is my husband and teammate, Scotty Gifford.
Hello, hello.
And today is a new day, and we're going to talk about...
Mediation.
Ooh, I think I do that on all our topics.
For sure, but...
So mediation is good and bad.
Yeah, in Texas, it's pretty much what you're going to be going into if you are going through a divorce and are going to be settling if there's any disputes about anything in your post.
It's not always just disputes. Sometimes you go to mediation, you get into temporary orders once you've filed. You go to mediation, like a 4-hour one for temp orders or an 8-hour one to, come to terms for the final decree. But we do know that mediation, and we're not attorneys, by the way. Let's have that disclaimer first. We're not attorneys.
Not attorneys.
We know from real life experience, we've been through it, and our clients as well. But you can get into your final decree orders, or if you have a modification of your decree, you've been divorced 4 years and somebody's coming back for something, you got to mediate before you actually do anything else.
Yeah. So this is what happens before trial. If you're going to go to trial. So, and good news is that 95% of cases are settled in mediation. So you don't have to go through the expense of trial and all that hassle preparing for trial, because trial in Texas can be very expensive.
And not only is it expensive, but it's really stressful. Mediation is stressful too, but like going to trial is even more stressful. So it's very costly. Think about your mentality too. So if you can mediate with your attorney and opposing counsel, try to come to the table with as much information that you can so you guys can settle things. Okay. But initially you go in with temporary orders first.
Yeah. And I think we'll do another video that we'll link to above we'll talk about how to prepare for mediation, because that's going to be a whole big topic here, but we're just going to kind of cover what is mediation and what you can expect.
Yeah. So mediation is when you and your attorney and your soon-to-be ex's attorney and them come together. You are in separate rooms, like you and your attorney in one room, they're in another room. Yeah, clear division. And a neutral party called a mediator comes in between each room, asking, what is it that you're wanting and what are we going to settle here? And are we talking about the house? Are there kids involved? What money? Is there a business? And they go from room to room. It's not always fast. I mean, it can be 2 hours of sitting in one room with nobody.
expect usually, minimum is probably about 4 hours, likely 8 hours, could be longer. I just recently went through mediation. We were 10 hours, right, to get everything decided, right? So
it's really fun.
and to know at knowing that point too, that you're paying both your attorney and for the mediator. Yes. So it can get expensive for both sides, right? Because both people have their attorneys and they have a mediator that they're paying for. So it does get, costly as well.
Well, if you're going in for what's called temporary orders, if you don't know what temporary orders are, when you file for divorce, or in Texas here, there's in Houston and surrounding 60-day waiting period. So if you have children, you usually get in what's called temporary orders, like who's going to have possession of the kids, who's living in the house, who's paying what bills, things that you can and cannot do. So that's like the first step. And so you mediate not as long on that, because you're not going to go over all the logistics of, you're going to get first, third, fifth weekends and you have this much money coming to you. It's not that in depth initially, but then when you do go to mediation about your divorce, that's when you've been working with your attorney for several weeks and you're like, okay, here's our assets, here's our debts, this is what we have, this is what we don't have, this is where we need to come together. And what is it that I'm wanting, kind of a thing. So that's kind of what mediation is. It is great because the mediators are wonderful, I would say.
Yeah, and their job is to help you to decide, and help come into an agreement that you can both live with, right? No one's going to walk out of there and feel like, I won, right? Their whole...
Maybe, if they're a narcissist.
But the whole point is that they're trying to get both sides to agree to something that they couldn't agree to beforehand, right? Because that's why you're in mediation to begin with, is because there's certain things you guys can agree upon. And, we cover, usually it's,
children.
Children is the biggest thing if you have children, right? Like, time of possession, who's doing what with when and who and how much is being paid.
Child support,
which is going to be with the children too. Then talk about any assets that are going to get divided, right? So is there 401ks? Is their house? Who's taking over,
And this isn't in the first initial mediation.
That's usually...
This is like working towards final decree. Or if you have a modification, say it's been a few years later and somebody says, they're wanting something specific and they need to go to mediation to settle out what it is. And then you kind of go over whatever their bullet points are that they're wanting and what you're willing to agree to or not willing to agree to. Okay. Also, in regards to choosing a mediator, typically you don't choose who they are. It's based off the county that you live in, and your attorney is going to make a recommendation for a mediator. Do you want to tell them who mediators sometimes are?
Yeah, so usually mediators might be former judges, right? So they have ruled over the court cases before, and they've heard both sides argue and things. And so they're kind of like, hey, they can say, if you don't agree to this, likely if you go to trial, you might likely lose anyways, and it's going to cost you way more money than it is here today.
Because they've been a judge, and they know exactly what can fly and what can't. So they're really good about bringing that stuff to your attention. Like, hey, you're kind of asking for the sun and the moon, and we don't normally cover those things, or this looks bad on your part. So that is nice when they have been a judge before, because they've been in the courtroom and they know exactly. But mediation is, they say 95% of the cases have been solved in mediation. You really want that. You don't really want to go to trial. If you're hell-bent on I get the kids full time, like, really take a good look at that. Like, why is it? I mean, if there's abuse, obviously there's a totally different scenario. But, if it's a divorce and you just have children, it's splitting up the time and you're fighting to have all of it, or you don't want them to have anything because you don't think they need to be, that's really not going to work. And so the mediators are there to bring everybody together to do what's in the best interest of the child, or if there's no children, yourself. And what are we talking about money-wise? And you don't really want to go to trial.
Yeah, and like say, that's all good points there, because it's just, at the end of the day, it's going to be a tough decision that you're dealing with, and you're going to have to give up some things that you think you want, but you can't walk away with everything realistically. When you're dividing a marriage, it's like a business. You got to give up something at the end of the day. So, and
they're going to say, well, they gave up this. What can you give up? So,
yeah. And then, so an important note that I wanted to say though, too, is remember that anything that you decide in mediation is not going to be overturned by a judge later. So if you agree to give up the house, or you agree to give up your time with the kids and agree to some weird schedule in there, or whatever you agree to, remember that no one's going to come back to you and go, well, you shouldn't have done that, and we'll change it for you. No, they're just going to say, well, you agreed to that, so that's what we're going to stick to.
Exactly. So be sure what you're agreeing to. You really agree to it. You might have some qualms about a couple things, but ask questions, because he's right. A judge can't even overturn what you decided. So if you go home and sleep on it, and the next day you're like, I don't like that so much. Too late.
Yeah. And so that's where our big thing we always talk about, circling back to real estate here, is that, if you agree to let your ex-spouse keep the house, and they're not even qualified to keep it, there's no way that they can be qualified to keep this house with the money that they're going to be receiving or from their current job, you're probably putting yourself in a bit of a pickle, and it's going to be hard for you to overturn that, because the judge is going to say, well, you said you gave it to them, right? So, you didn't order that they had to sell the home, or you didn't order that they should have to refinance the house out of your name. So, they can just keep the home indefinitely. So be sure that when it comes to the house, and that's why we do this too, is to say, make sure that you are protected on that house going into mediation. So we'll have some more tips and tricks that we'll cover about the mediation in our next video, but I just wanted to put that out there, that make sure that you know what you're doing with the house before you go to mediation.
Yeah. So mediation, pro mediation. That's all we have for today. So watch our next video. And as always, we're here to bring you real life experiences to all your real estate needs. I should be looking there. I'm looking here.
You look